What's that squeaking behind that man? Hi there, everybody. Thane Maynard here. I'm director of the Cincinnati Zoo. This is the first Facebook Live home safari I've done, so I'm excited about it. Over the years, people have asked me what my favorite animal is, and of course that's hard to answer because it depends how you look at it, right? The most important animals in the world by far are insects. Insects recycle nutrients, feed half the animals in the world, pollinate the rest of the plants of the world, and without insects we couldn't make it. And then of course there are what are called charismatic megavertebrates, which are big animals like Fiona, and everybody loves big mammals that are fun and sexy. But throughout most of my life, I'll admit, my favorite animal has always been the American alligator. This is Cruncher. Cruncher is a 6-month-old American alligator. They hatch out of an egg like a goose egg. It's a hard-shelled egg that's about 2.5 inches long. As I talk, you might hear him call a little bit. He gives a great call, and the reason is, in nature, he'd be calling his mother. Most reptiles do not see their babies. Like sea turtles, they lay their eggs and swim away. But alligator moms stick around, and it helps protect the babies after they hatch. So if he starts giving a little noise, he goes like this. It sounds like halfway between a chirp and a burp. It sounds like that because if you look in his mouth, you'll see it's not open like ours. If you open your mouth, there's a hole, but if you look at his, it's closed like a ham sandwich. And that's because he lives in the water. If it was open, he'd swallow water all the time. So it makes him give sort of a funny call. But if you ever hear that and you're in nature, down in Florida, South Carolina, Texas, Louisiana, do not get in the water. Do not try to get your golf ball because gators have made a comeback. When I was a kid, now this is 60 years ago, you couldn't find a gator if you had to. I grew up in Central Florida. We swam at dawn, we swam in the dark, we swam across lakes in the dark. You would not do that today. Let me tell you, if you did that today, you would be gator bait. That's not just a story, it's true. There's over 3 million gators in Florida now. That's up from 600,000 50 years ago. So they were the first species put on the endangered species list, and they were the first species taken off the endangered species list because of that great big comeback. So they can be dangerous, but you don't have to worry if you're in Florida. They don't come over and tip over your kayak and try to eat you, but you should be cautious about where you swim and never ever swim in the dark. That's for darn sure. Now, he's small now, of course, but he's gonna get bigger. He's more colorful with those stripes than he'll be when he's older. When alligators get full grown, they're black all over. That's a little bit for sunblock because they live where there's a huge amount of sun. Once in a while, there are albino alligators, and they typically don't live so long because they will, in fact, get skin cancer and die. But the dark skin actually helps them. They have specialized plates on their back, and that protects them as well. The business end of a gator is not their mouth, it's their tail. Their tail's how they swim so fast. They swim much faster than humans in the water. And on the other end, of course, they're built to live in the water. Their eyes and ears and nose are on the top of their head, and that way they don't need snorkels and goggles and all the things that humans need to live in the water. We're not built to be in the water at all. We're terrible at it. Michael Phelps, fastest human to ever swim, only swims 3 miles an hour, which is not very fast compared to everything that lives in the water. A turtle can swim faster than Michael Phelps, and even an alligator can too. So he should be careful if he goes to Florida or Louisiana. Now they do have sharp teeth, even as a baby. Did you see that? He was trying to get me. I tell you, he is a mean one. Well, let's do this. We brought him on a special trip because the zoo's closed and he wanted to see what's going on. We're here at Manatee Springs, which is a Florida exhibit. Has 50 species of animals in here, all live in Florida, especially the manatees, and the biggest female gator I've ever seen. Her name is Lucy. Let's go see Lucy. That's his big cousin. All right, you've probably been to Manatee Springs. When you come in here in the summer, this greenhouse feels like Florida, nice and humid. In fact, even on a day in May, it's nice and humid. But here's Lucy. Look at her, she's 9 feet long. She's about 20 years old. And what I like about this exhibit, that's exactly what she'd look like if you were walking along a lake or a swamp in Florida. A dark animal in dark water, some cypress knees, but hard to spot. So when you're doing that, make sure you're careful when you're walking around areas like that. Now, alligators have some special things you might not know. They have a specialized eyelid that they use that they can close, and they use them just like goggles. There's a scientist down at the University of Florida, go Gators, named Kent Vliet, and he's the world expert on the American alligator. He and his grad students are the ones that, you might have seen this on Discovery Channel, they swim with alligators at night in Central Florida, and they'll put little clips on their eyes so they can't close that little, what's called a nictitating membrane, and use it like goggles. And then they test, are they able to catch things better or worse with that? And of course, without it, they can't see nearly as well. But can you imagine that your job as a graduate student is to swim in the dark at night and catch wild alligators and put clips on their eyeballs? And I'm not making this up. This is what they do. This isn't like fake reality TV with Steve Irwin. This is the real thing. So that's how he separates his grad students from the ones that don't want to be grad students. Now, of course, Cruncher is a baby, 6 months old, and May is Zoo Baby Month. And even though the zoo's not open, we're celebrating. We've got babies all over the place, and none are cooler than Cruncher. We also want to thank our friends at First Financial Bank. They're the sponsor for Zoo Babies, and we're getting the word out electronically, not just with this, but all sorts of other things. Speaking of getting the word out, while you're watching this, you can hit a little button and make a donation to the zoo's emergency fund, because right now, of course, we're going broke since we're not open. So if you'd like to donate, that'd be great. A lot of people have over the last, now almost 2 months. You can also go to the zoo's website, cincinnatizoo.org, and buy a zoo t-shirt, buy a zoo mask. There are all kinds of things you can do to support us. But if you did it right now, it'd be great, because it showed that people love Cruncher, and he's our guy.
They have some questions about
Oh, wait, there's
Cruncher.
questions from Cruncher's adoring fans.
Yes. Well, what is the difference between alligator and crocodile? That's from Hannah.
All right, Hannah asked, what's the difference between an alligator and a crocodile? Well, the interesting thing is the similarity is quite something. There's about 20 species, and most of them are crocodiles. Only 2 of them are officially alligators, but they're all more similar than different. Alligators, both the American alligator and the Chinese alligator, which we have in our reptile house, have a big round snout, and they have an overbite, so when they close their mouths, you can get them. You can only see top teeth. Crocodiles have a pointy snout, and we have an American crocodile right down here. What's her name?
Leslie.
Leslie. That's a nice name for a crocodile. They have a pointy snout, and when they close their mouth, you can always see at least 2 bottom teeth sticking out. The biggest difference, though, is range. American alligators live only in the American Southeast, from Texas all the way around to Virginia, whereas crocodiles live around much of the rest of the world, including the Caribbean. The one exception where they overlap is the American crocodile does live in southern Florida. You can see them on Key Largo in the northern Keys, and you can see them in the southern Everglades as well.
Winnie would like to know if they eat every day.
Oh, that's a great question, and we're just going to ask Hannah, how often do you feed your gators?
Usually
Jenna,
about.
we're going to ask her too.
Yeah, I'm here. Usually about once a week, once every other week, depending on the time of year.
Okay, in case you couldn't hear it, once a week typically, sometimes once every other week if it's the winter time and the light's different and they're not as hungry. Snakes at the zoo as well don't eat so often. The difference, of course, can be an alligator in the wild will sometimes kill something very big. Say they catch a deer and pull it in, drown it, stuff it under a log. They won't eat it all in one bite, but as it starts to rot, they'll come back and take chunks out of it and eat that, maybe come back a number of days later, which seems gross to us, but if that was your job, you'd think it was really great.
Danette wants to know how strong their bite is.
Oh, alligators can bite. There's no doubt about it. Like many, many creatures, it's really to do with the physics of it. The way their jaws work is they can bite down really hard. They don't have the same strength to open their mouths. That's the reason you will often see, which really happens, people that catch gators or need to move a gator, they will quickly put duct tape around their mouth. And you think duct tape doesn't seem very strong, but if you get it around their mouth, they can't really have the strength to pop it off. Now, if you don't get it around it quickly, they might bite you, so you've got to be very adept at that. But most people that are gator wranglers are pretty good at it. But yes, they can bite like crazy.
Sonia wants to know how big Cruncher will get.
That's a great question. Cruncher is a male alligator, so believe it or not, when he's done, and this might be 50 years from now, reptiles grow their whole lives, right? Birds are grown up usually in a month or 2, as big as they're ever going to get. Humans tend to grow up as they're adolescents and they get into teen years. Reptiles grow their whole lives. So that's a great big female at 9 feet, but male alligators can get to 12 to 15 feet. Now, unfortunately, just like humans sometimes, when they get older, 50 years and older, they start to grow out. So when you see a real old alligator, even in the wild, he's a great big round animal, looks almost like a tree in the water.
Dexter wants to know how cold or hot does the egg need to be to hatch?
You know, it's a fascinating thing. Researchers have found that in a number of species, including the American alligator, the temperature of the nest controls the gender of the young that hatch. And when it goes above a certain temperature, that will dominantly be males, and when it's below a certain temperature, it'll be females. I do not remember exactly what that temperature differentiate is, but it's interesting that it's that way. The reason that alligators build nests is for two reasons. One is to protect those eggs from things like raccoons, possums, other animals and scavengers that would come eat the eggs, so they cover them up. But mostly it's to stabilize the temperature, because the moms are cold-blooded, so sitting on the eggs wouldn't warm them up. So covering them with a little bit of sand and a little bit of vegetation keeps them warm, and also keeps them out of the sun so they don't get too warm. Plus, if a mother alligator who can weigh 500 pounds sits on top of the egg, she can crush it.
Claire wants to know if their senses are good: hearing, smell, vision, etc.
Well, that's a great question. They do have good hearing. Believe it or not, they have ears. You can't really see them, but they're the little slits behind the eye. You know, when you think of snakes, snakes do not have external ears or even ear openings, but snakes can feel vibrations. In this case, these do hear airborne vibrations, but they don't have big floppy ears because they swim in the water. So their hearing's good, their eyesight's pretty good, as I mentioned with that third eyelid for hunting underwater. If those same scientists have learned, if their eyes are completely closed, they can't hunt worth a hoot underwater, so they do depend on their eyesight. Their nose is in the front, they have a decent sense of smell. So yeah, they're fully equipped. They're a fully loaded aquatic predator, that's for darn sure. They principally are nocturnal, so if you want to see alligators in the wild, if you're down in, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, all the way around, go out at night with a great big flashlight and shine on the water. And it can be darn near anywhere. It could be on a golf course. It can be if it's a big, pond near a development where they've sort of had a borrow pit, there'll be alligators in it these days. And for sure, don't get too close. The animals that get the biggest trouble from gators are little dogs, because people come from the north, they bring their dog down for vacation or to overwinter, and of course the dogs are naive. And so for the very same reason that dogs get sprayed by skunks, because they don't know they should leave skunks alone and they keep barking at them, same thing, if a dog keeps barking at an alligator long enough, he's going to lunge out of that drainage ditch and eat him. So keep your dog on a leash and keep him close.
Rayleigh wants to know how long they sleep in a day.
Alligators are not hyperactive. There's some animals that move a lot. When you think of mammals, for instance, shrews and weasels, those are animals who are raring to go. Most birds are really active. Many reptiles, they live a pretty placid life. So much of the day, alligators will rest, sometimes over in the shallows, though they can float, but they'll just rest and be quiet. At night, if they're hungry, they will go out and look for food. But, they're more active than a tortoise, but probably no more active than an aquatic turtle.
One last question from Joy. How many inches do they grow a year?
It's interesting. When they're young, they can grow a foot a year, but they'll only do that till they're about 6 feet long. Scientists think that they have that growth spurt when they're young, because once they get to a certain size, that gives them a certain amount of protection. Because once you've got a decent sized alligator, nobody's going to attack them. But when they're little like this, if their mom wasn't sticking around, male alligators might come and kill them and think they're not their own offspring. But also, a great blue heron might try to catch them and kill them, and a variety, even a big fish could kill an alligator this size. So sticking with their mom's a good idea. When early European naturalists came to the New World, and they saw crocodiles and alligators, where the mom would come over and the babies would climb out of the nest onto their head or into their mouths, and she'd take them over to sort of a site over on the edge of the swamp. They reported that they were cannibalistic, and the moms were eating the babies. But they weren't eating the babies. They were just moving the babies and making sure there'd be protection. When you hear that the males might sometimes eat the babies, that's not because they're bad guys or mean. They are just concerned and territorial for where they live, and they want to make sure that all the offspring are theirs. And some animals do that, but over time, it's a breeding system that works. Females can have dozens of babies, and they're not all going to make it, because there's only room for so many predators in an ecosystem. But fortunately, alligators have made a comeback, and they are certainly proof that people and wild animals can live together, because there are 5 times as many people in Florida as there were when I was a kid. But there's also 5 times as many alligators, so it seems to work out. So thanks for watching this. Thanks for supporting the Cincinnati Zoo. This was fun. From Facebook Live Home Safari, Cruncher the alligator. Thank you, guys.